seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This is the Freedom Talk Radio 2013 Network, and you are listening to Surrounded by Idiots.
In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
From beautiful Saline in southeastern Michigan.
Around the world at sunsky.mysteries.com.
This is the 2009 Top 10 Webcam in the World winner. This is SETV.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is our regularly scheduled Saturday evening show. Hopefully, the small issues that we've been having with the internet here in southeastern Michigan are not going to reach up and bite us tonight. We have a fabulous guest tonight who I believe is destined to do very important work for the country. His name is Nick Zoller, and he is a congressional candidate for the Florida 13th District, or is it the 31st District, Nick?
13th.
The 13th District. And that's down by Fort Lauderdale, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Pinellas County at St. Petersburg.
Okay, St. Petersburg. And for those of you that are watching on the video side of the stream, which will be up on YouTube after the show, you can see that I have the Wikipedia page for Florida's 13th Congressional District. And Nick is running in the regular election, not in the special election that's coming up. Explain to the folks why they're having a special election.
Well, it was national news when it happened. Bill Young died last month while serving his 22nd term. I believe, yes, his 22nd. So under Florida law, they have to hold a special election. It's no timetable, but Governor Scott decided to set it for March 11th, 2014, which coincides with several municipal elections that are going on within the district already. So as a way of saving money on the special election, he's having it at that same time.
Okay, so you're not running in the special election. Why did you choose not to run in that one, or is there a reason why you can't?
Well, of the people who are in this race, I was the only one who got in before Bill Young died. I had already decided that I was running in the regularly scheduled election, and that's what I stuck with. I did believe, and I still do, that to fill out Bill Young's final term, since he did do a lot for his country and a lot for this community, I felt like someone who'd worked closely with him and knew him well should finish out what's going to turn out to be those final nine and a half months of his last term in Congress, because the people of Pinellas County chose him to represent our county in Congress for these 2 years. Beyond that, I believe that we do need a change in direction, both as a country and as a community in Pinellas County. So I am taking the time, rather than jump-starting a quick effort and trying to win over voters in a couple weeks when I do not have high name identification, just because I'm not an elected official. I decided to take my time, actually craft specific plans on how to fix the problems we're facing as a country, and really focus in on that August primary.
Oh, very good. Bless you, sir. That is, I think that's wondrous news. I don't know about the listeners, but our audience is Christian conservatives, and we all know that we desperately need help in Washington, D.C. We need somebody to ride in there and try to fix this mess that's going on right now. Let me ask you as the first question, what do you believe is the greatest problem that we need to address as a country right now?
We need to address the excessive regulations of small businesses, first and foremost. Small businesses create, I think the last number was about 57% of the new jobs in the country. Small businesses are what's going to drive our economy, what's going to get us out of the stagnation that we've been in with the economy since the 2008 crisis. And really the government, all they've done is try to manipulate that, try to get us out of it, and it obviously hasn't worked. And the reason it hasn't worked is because they passed things through the EPA and through other federal agencies that have just really killed small business job creators. Additional regulations and additional costs that get passed on to those small businesses make it impossible for them to hire new workers and make it impossible for us to get America back to work.
Now, in the current climate in Washington, how do you envision going about doing that?
Well, the first thing is, obviously, we've got to win the Senate. We have to win the Senate, and if we don't, we're going to have 2 years where the situation's just going to get worse. But the first thing that we need to do is put a freeze on any new regulations being passed on to small businesses. We need to do that so that we can look at the current regulations, bring in stakeholders from around the country, and figure out just how much damage the current hundreds of regulations are doing to our small businesses and are doing to the job market. Once we do that, we need to start a process of repealing and amending existing small business regulations to take away that government burden and allow job creators to do what they do, create jobs and let the economy drive forward as a strong force rather than a weak one that it's been for the last, pretty much about 13 years since the Bush years.
Yeah.
We've had a pretty weak economy.
Let me ask you a question. You sound like a pretty good conservatively based person that understands what's going on. What do you think caused the crash in 2008?
Well, it was just manipulation of the economy. It's what we're doing now. It's this artificial bubble that we build up where the government is requiring and allowing subprime loans. And these subprime loans ultimately don't get paid back. So you look at the situation with the housing bubble, where we have Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, just these huge quasi-government agencies that just have all these bad mortgages. And obviously, all these foreclosures building up, the banks are losing money. So when the banks are losing all this money and the market is not sound, everything just sort of falls off as a domino effect. And that's what we have going on here again that people really don't focus in on. We got away from the housing bubble somewhat, although I think that that's going to jump back into the forefront within the next decade. But we get away from the housing bubble, and now, as I've said several times in different speeches, we're building this student loan bubble with these federally backed student loans, especially since there's various ways to have loan forgiveness, which basically means the taxpayer just eats the money that's been spent for a student to go to school. And then we've got another problem with subprime auto lending. And both of those are just bubbles just right above our heads that are going to burst, and they're going to play into another bubble that's the government bubble that's even worse. The government bubble has to do with all of our unfunded liabilities that are truly just going to crush this nation.
I agree. My next question was actually going to be about the student loan bubble and what's going on with that. It is that and the massive quantitative easing that they're partaking in is just, it's insane. It makes absolutely no sense to me.
It's like someone's not good at playing Monopoly and bets the house on one property and then can't afford the taxes. I mean, it's just idiocy. It's complete idiocy. And the fact that the Department of Education is playing Russian roulette with our economy, it's just maddening. And truthfully, when we point to the fact that costs continue to rise for college education, students can't afford college education because the costs continue to rise, so we need to give additional loans, additional federally backed loans. The thing is, costs always rise when the government gets involved. So what we need to do is get rid of federally backed student loans, get rid of the Federal Department of Education, and let the free market drive that price down. Let the free market set that price, because I can tell you right now, Princeton University does not want to have 65% of their seats empty because students can't get that loan amount. They will lower their prices to fill the seats. And that's what colleges will do across the country. If we don't have federally backed loans, if everyone can't qualify for that amount that that school requires, then the schools are going to have to lower their prices, because that's how the free market works. It's supply and demand. And right now, the supply can cost whatever we want it to, because the demand is as high as it can be, because the government will give you what amount of money you need. The government will get you that loan. As long as that's taking place, we're going to have college tuition. I mean, in the next decade, there's going to be plenty of schools that are $100,000 a year for undergraduate degrees. And that is just sick. That's disgusting. Because most of these students that are going to graduate from those schools are not even going to make $100,000 a year once they graduate. Not in this job market.
I have to agree with 100% with that. I want to ask you a question, and
sure.
we saw this with in 2010 when the Tea Party candidates won their elections and got into the Congress. They were told, I'm led to believe, that if they don't play ball, they will be locked out of all committees and all decision making, and basically they can just sit there and wait until their terms are over and go back home like good little children, like they should be. So I want to ask you, on your first day in Congress, you're sitting there in your brand new office, looking out the window at a dumpster or whatever it is that freshman congressmen get to look at out the window, and John Boehner walks into the office there and points his finger at you and says, "You're going to play ball. You're going to do what we tell you to do, or else." Is going to be your response to that?
Well, I've addressed this before. I don't care about the or else, because I'm not trying to spend an entire career in Washington. As I've said numerous times, I think Washington's a beautiful city. I love visiting it. There's a lot of fun things to do in D.C. I don't want to spend my life on the government dole, and I've already said that at most I will serve 2 terms, because I don't believe in the notion that if you can't get something done in 4 years, then you need 40. It's complete BS at this point. John Boehner, Eric Cantor, any of these folks who try to make themselves the saviors of the conservative movement, it's just not reality. They're not doing anything to save our country. They, at this point, are no better than the other side of the aisle in the House. The truth of the matter is, yeah, they control committee seats. That's great. Unfortunately, I'm not looking to bring back bacon to my district. I'm not looking to get earmarks for my district, because those earmarks are coming directly from foreign money that's manipulating our economy. We can't afford these congressional earmarks. I don't often agree with Sarah Palin. I'll put that out there, but I think she did say that if they wanted that bridge to nowhere, they would have built it themselves in Alaska. That's how I feel about all these congressional districts across the country. If there are needs in the community, the state should take care of it. That's not the role of the federal government. So John Boehner and anyone else can bully me around as much as they want. They're not going to want me to be a member of their club in Washington because I don't drink the Kool-Aid and I won't buy into it.
That is the answer I was hoping you would give. That is, I think we need to hear a lot more of that coming from the candidates that we have running across the country for 2014. I am so.
I think so too.
I am so serious about that. I don't know if I should be depressed or happy that people like yourself are coming to the front and willing to run for these positions. In your opinion, how many other candidates that have your viewpoint do you think we'll see popping up across the country? And specifically, how can we, the average citizen or somebody like myself in the media, help them as much as we possibly can to get in there and help start straightening this mess out?
Well, the first thing is, as far as people who can articulate a message in such a way that makes them viable and explain the issues well enough that voters who might not typically fall in line with a lot of these constitutionalist candidates will support them. I really think we're looking at maybe a dozen people in the country for 2014. But with a dozen people, you can make a little bit of noise. You can get some things done. And really, I think if we can get 12 more people in there that are along this line of thinking that enough is enough, that we're not going to back down to anybody, I think that helps the ones that are already there, who are of that mindset. People like Justin Amash from your backyard right there in Michigan. And I think the biggest thing that can help candidates like myself is anyone in the media, anyone in the grassroots that supports us. And as a matter of fact, a good example of this today, a guy who I've never met in my life, and this has happened multiple times already, from Alaska, from a town I've never even heard of. Someone sent me a text right before I called in. He sent us a check today because he knows how important it is that we get people who are right on the issues into D.C., people who will not back down. And that's the biggest thing. Any candidate who truly is right on the issues, truly is going to stand up for conservative constitutionalist values, is not going to be embraced by special interests, is not going to be embraced by big business. And so the biggest thing is asking anyone you know to go out, and even if they can only send, $5, $10, tell them to get themselves and 5 other friends to send that $10. Because if you get thousands of people across the country doing that for all of these different candidates who are going to need it, then that really makes a difference. That really is what adds up and propels the campaign forward. And a good example of that from a grassroots level is Barack Obama, because he would not have gained the traction that he did in 2008 without grassroots small dollar donations against Hillary Clinton.
Yes, that is actually quite correct, I believe. His website, ladies and gentlemen, is Zoller for Congress, ZOLLER for Congress.com. I urge everybody to go there and donate what you can. And Nick, how do they find other candidates that are conservatives that are running for either the Senate or the Congress? How do people find out about you and other candidates?
They've really got to do their research. A lot of times, candidates who really toe the conservative line on most issues are not the ones that are the anointed party favorite. Obviously, we're not the folks that John Boehner wants sitting in his caucus in D.C. So you really have to do your research. You really have to look into who's running in every race, and especially in your own district, you've got to look at the candidates and look directly at their website, directly at their social media, see what they're saying, and see what their platform is. Because really, if they put it in writing, it's pretty hard to run away from that later on.
Yes. Is there a database or a listing of candidates that a person can get to easily without having to basically go to every district in the country?
Well, you can go on the FEC's website, fec.gov, and you can basically search who's filed by state and then by congressional district. And actually, if you just do it by state, it'll pull up every district in the state. You'll be able to see who's filed individuals. There are different websites out there for parties that I can't think of my head.
Opening the door for you to some kind of back and forth with our state party chairman, Lenny Curry, in Florida. And he was making the point that the argument is yes. That African Americans are going to now overturn the court case. That is not individuals in the Republic will they're all to look and say, I can save money monthly. And a lot of times, it's a more expensive plan, and they get less for their money. It's a complete mess. There's fixes that can be put in place. Ultimately, I hope we can repeal the Affordable Care Act because it's a nightmare. But until we can, we need to pass through as much as we can to fix it. If we can't defund it, then we need to put as many fixes in there as we can to make the burden less on small businesses and make the burden less on middle-class families. Because these are the people who are getting hit. Lower-class families, people who are not doing well in this economy, those folks are going to be okay under the Affordable Care Act because the government is going to pay for their health care.
People who are in the middle class are the ones who are going to get hit by this. People who Barack Obama says he's focused on taking care of are the ones that are going to get squeezed further and further and further. And that's what our government has done repeatedly through the Bush years also, but especially since January 20th, 2009, we've been squeezing the middle class, and there's not much left that they can take.
There really isn't. I know from my own personal life and from the people that I know that there's no money left. You know, we can't keep listening to what these government people tell us. You know, it's only going to be another $3 a year for the average family or $5 a year for the average family. We can't afford that anymore. We don't have the $3 or $5. And on the healthcare website, I have been watching the tech news and listening to all of the opinionators and listening to the statistics that they are releasing. And I believe, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong about this, I believe that what we're seeing right now, especially from the millennial generation, is a grassroots civil disobedience springing up. I don't think that they are going there on purpose. I think that they have just thrown their hands up and said, I'm not even going to partake in this. Do you see that? Because we obviously don't see it in the mainstream media because they're not going to cover a subject like that. Are you seeing that on the ground?
I think a lot of people are just kind of to the point that they just can't even fathom how bad this is, how big a mess it is. And I think you're right. People are just throwing their hands up and saying, I'm not even going to bother signing up. I'm just going to get hit with whatever, I forget what it is this first year. What is it, a $50 or $250 penalty in the first year? I think a lot of people would rather get hit with that than pay $400 a month for a cruddy health insurance plan.
If I'm not mistaken, it's actually either the $90 or 1%.
It's $90. You're right.
1% times 12 of your income, and usually
and that
works out to be more.
Whichever is higher.
Right.
Of that
obviously, the 1% is going to be higher for almost 100% of the people.
So whichever. I think it's the $90, or you pay the 1% if it's lower than the $90.
Yeah, and I think
sorry for that. The first couple of years, you don't have to pay the percentage of your income. You can take that alternative. But then once we get to, I believe it'll be 2016, to the third year after implementation for taxes, then I believe you have to pay that percentage of your income, but it does cap at a certain level. But still, it's a huge burden for families who are already going to be paying taxes at that time of year, especially small business owners, and especially people who are independent contractors, who are 1099 employees. Those folks already pay a huge tax burden. They pay more than what their bracket would be if they were W-2 employees. And I don't know how the economy can survive that. The economy is only surviving right now because it's artificially inflated. Because every time we need more money to prop it up, we just print it. That's why prices are going up. That's why we're seeing inflation. I mean, they were just talking the other day, surprisingly, on mainstream media. The CBS Evening News was talking about the fact that food prices, and I forget the exact percentage, but I believe they said 6 or 7% rise over the next year in food prices.
I predict it's going to be more than that.
This is what I'm saying. The mainstream media. We've got CBS News saying that it's 6 or 7%. That should scare anybody. If the media is willing to admit that it's 6%, you better bet it could be 12.
Yes, I agree with that. Just 5 years ago, I was able to buy food for us for 2 weeks for usually around $75. And now, even going to Walmart and buying the really cheap stuff the really inexpensive food, it's costing me $150 every 2 weeks.
Well, and it's not that inexpensive anymore. It's more than the good stuff was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
It's more than the expensive food was a couple of years ago. And I'm the same way. Food has just gone up an exorbitant amount of money. I can remember I have a 75-pound dog. He always goes through about a bag and a half of food a month. This food was $40 a bag about a year, 2 years ago, about that same range. It's now about $60. Same food.
Yes.
Same food that he's always been on, but it's the transportation cost.
It's
the material cost that's increasing. And it's being passed along to consumers. It's not like healthcare.gov. There's not a subsidy in place to make sure people sign up. We're still getting hit. We're still getting squeezed. And it's because of everything that this president is doing wrong. It's everything that Congress is doing wrong on both sides of the aisle. And it's everything that the Federal Reserve is doing wrong that's only going to get worse once Janet Yellen is in office.
What's your opinion of Yellen? I haven't. I know she's not good news. I believe that she's just going to continue Bernanke's path to destruction. Is there any other damage that she could do other than what's being done now? I mean, how much of a rogue cannon
she could
is
print
she?
more money. She could print more money, and the dollar could be even more worthless, and inflation could come even faster than it is now. I mean, it could be a real problem. We could have hyperinflation that takes place from manipulating the economy the way that she might. I think more likely we go on the same collision course we're on now. I don't think she's going to try to shake too much up. I really think it's a shame that, and I just blanked on his name, Larry Summers. I really think it's a shame that Democrats thought Larry Summers was too conservative, because truthfully, though he is a Democrat, I believe Larry Summers was our best option to be more toward kind of a Greenspan type of guy, where it's not really where we want to be for the Federal Reserve. It's not where we want to be for the economy, but it's a heck of a lot better than Bernanke, and it's surely better than Janet Yellen. And unfortunately, our good friends on the Hill, on the left side of the aisle, they chose to vocally oppose him becoming the nominee for Fed chairman. And so what happens is Obama has to move to the left. We go away from a moderate and we get a far left liberal.
That's very sad, but par for the course at this point. Let me get your opinion on this. With the economy and the finances that the Fed is, the quantitative easing and everything, is there any kind of a parachute that we can use to ease us down off of this cliff, or are we looking at some type of hyperinflation no matter what we do?
I don't know that we're looking at hyperinflation no matter what. I know that, certain economists that don't really line up with the people who are being consulted by Democrats in Washington, certain ones are saying that hyperinflation is coming no matter what we do. But I do think that everyone's going to share in the pain. Everyone's going to get hit harder than they were in 2008, because if we start to eliminate the overspending, if we eliminate the manipulation of the economy, then for a time that means certain businesses are going to fail because they're not going to be propped up by the government. Certain people are not going to have that money that they've been living off of because the government's been giving it to them. Because if you're able to work, then you need to work. You don't need to be on Social Security disability. And unfortunately, there's a lot of fraud in that. There's a lot of fraud in that. There's a lot of fraud in other welfare programs. And if we really start cracking down, if we really start trying to save our country, then everyone's going to be hurt a little bit. And everyone's going to struggle. But the thing is, if we get back to letting the free market do what it does best, let strong businesses survive, weak businesses fail, which we should have done with certain auto companies in 2009, that's when we're actually going to come out on the other side and be in a better situation than we would be if we continue on this course.
Do you think there's still a free market, or has it been adulterated to the point where it's basically dead?
The free market at this point, for the most part, I believe is small businesses. I believe that is what the free market is at this point. And I believe that the government is trying to kill it. The government is doing everything it can to make it impossible for new and small businesses to start up because of the regulatory costs that are just through the roof. The cost of hiring an employee is ridiculous. And beyond that, I think there are some larger companies that still live by free market principles. I mean, you look at when we did the auto bailout, when our president said that's what we had to do to save the auto industry, and they actually wanted Ford to be a part of that. Ford did what they had to do to adjust to the times and survive. Ford did not take the government's money, did not take a government buyout, and they survived. And that's the epitome of the free market. They survived because customers wanted to buy their new product. And that's what needs to happen with every industry. If certain banks were going bankrupt and failing, then we should have let them fail. Because nothing is, quote unquote, too big to fail. That's not how the free market works. If a business is no longer profitable, then it closes up shop. And yes, people lose their jobs, but ultimately, if there's a service that needs to be fulfilled, another company or multiple other companies will sprout up and fill that slot in the market. Just because one company mismanages and misappropriates funds and ultimately fails does not mean that the economy as a whole is going to fail. That only occurs when the government manipulates different markets to the point that there is so much debt that, yes, it's going to crush multiple industries, but that's not the free market. That's the government manipulating the economy.
Do you, in your opinion, do you think the economy in this country is still strong enough to weather what's coming? Do you think we have the wherewithal still as a country to get through it without completely going to pieces?
You know, I don't know. I don't think that we have much of an option. I don't think we have the option of saying, oh, well, it's just going to be easier to do what we've been doing. It's just going to be easier to continue what's been deficit spending for most of the last century. It's just easier to do this. It's just easier to do that. It's just easier to continue the farce of Social Security. If we just keep perpetuating the problem without trying to bring a solution, then there might not be an America in future generations. America, at the bottom of our flag, it might say made in China in 100 years if we don't solve the serious problems we have. If we don't have people who have the intestinal fortitude to go to D.C. and say this is wrong, this is not what our American dream was meant to be.
That is a very good answer.
We've been a country that's always been so appealing to foreign nationals. We've been so appealing that people are willing to risk their lives hiring coyotes and coming across the Mexican border, or even coming from Eastern Europe. We have a lot of illegal immigrants coming from Eastern Europe. We have all these people who've always wanted to come here, and the reason they want to come here is because in America, you have a chance. You have a chance to make something of your life. You have a chance to start a business. You have a chance to start out without a penny in your pocket when you're born. Your family's broke. Your dad's in jail, but you could still own a Fortune 500 company. And unfortunately, that window has all but closed at this point. And we've got to crack it back open. We've got to make it so that anyone who's born in this country, anyone who lives in this country, has just as much of a chance of succeeding as anyone else.
That is an excellent answer. I give you high kudos, sir, for your opinions and sticking to them. I know it has to be very difficult with the getting media interviews, saying stuff like that. I don't envy your position trying to do what you're trying to do, getting to Washington like that. It has to be discouraging sometimes for you. How do you get a lot of pushback from people about your opinions?
Well, the pushback, more often than not, does not come from the everyday voter. If you explain an issue and you explain it well enough that they understand what the government is doing to manipulate our economy and to really destroy the future of this country for themselves, for their children, for their grandchildren, for their brothers, their sisters, for any other person who comes to this country, they are open to different opinions. They're open to something else than the rhetoric that's been spouted for the last several elections. I spoke to a group last week, and one thing that I said to them is we have to get out of this habit of assuming that the way our political system should work is party bosses picking who the most electable person is on paper, throwing all their resources behind that person, and saying we need to clear the field. Because that's not what our founders intended. Our founders intended that the person with the best ideas, with the most integrity, with the best ability to help our country is who would go to Washington, who would serve in the people's house. And at this point, it's not the people's house, it's Wall Street's house. It's the special interest house. And so I don't get discouraged. Even if I get pushback from journalists, even if I get pushback from party insiders on the left and the right, I'm not worried about that because literally, unlike most politicians, this isn't about me. I'm not trying to build a lifelong political career. I'm trying to make sure that by the time I get to retirement, and I still have decades to go, by the time I get to retirement, I want our country to look like the country I was born in. I want our country to still say that it has an American dream. That that's the reason people come to this country. And that's what drives me every day. No matter what obstacle comes up, and there have already been plenty of obstacles, I just don't care about the odds, and I don't care about my chances. Because I know that what I'm saying is right. I know that I stand on the right side of the issues, and I know that I stand on the right side when it comes to backing the American people.
That is fabulous to hear. I wish we'd hear that all over this country even more. Sadly, a lot of the politicians that I have interviewed and talked to are more of the rhino variety rather than the a believer in the Constitution. Can we spend the rest of this segment, we got about 15, 20 minutes left, can we spend the rest of this talking about some of your stands on some of the issues that you have on your website?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the most important ones to me, and I'll tell you why. It's because it's energy, and it's because I see the gas prices, and I've noticed that every time the price of gasoline gets up to $4 a gallon, the economy starts to slow down because of all the stresses that the additional cost of transportation and everything puts on the system. We're hovering right around 325 right now, and it's far, far too high. I know that right now the United States is the biggest oil producer in the world. We've surpassed Saudi Arabia finally, and that's because of the new technologies that have been brought online. So I can understand the high price of gasoline because it costs money to get that stuff out of the ground with this technology.
Yeah.
We have a place in northern Michigan, and I did a show for about 6 years called This Old Shack, and it's about my efforts to use alternative energy to power the place using solar panels, deep cycle batteries, generators, that sort of thing. So I understand the alternative energy market. What really disturbs me is what the EPA is doing or has done specifically to the coal industry, and is attempting to do to other segments of the energy market. And it's very disturbing to me, and I'd like to know what your opinion is of all of that, and second, what again the average citizen can do from our end to help you in Congress and people like you to try to reverse this, or at least hold off the damage long enough so that we can get somebody in the White House that knows what the heck they're doing.
Yeah, first of all, get myself and folks like me to Congress. That's the main thing. So any ability anyone has to spread information on social media, to ask their friends and family to donate to campaigns around the country, it is so important. It is so important that grassroots donors get behind conservative candidates and really propel these campaigns forward. And now to answer your question on energy, it comes back to the government meddling again. I don't ever support the government meddling in the free market. When we've supported companies like Solyndra and we've tried to push quote-unquote clean energy, all we're doing is wasting taxpayer money. Because truthfully, if the free market, if private companies come up with a good product that's reasonably affordable, can compete with other forms of energy, consumers will ultimately buy that product if it's an affordable option. They'll buy it because it's a good option, because they get more bang for their buck, and that's how the markets work. Our government trying to make it harder for coal miners and for the energy industry to use coal in providing electricity around the country is just frankly disgusting. I mean, this country really rose on the back of coal. Really, if it weren't for coal, we would not have had the economic successes that we had early on in our existence. And so I really think we've got to get out of this business of trying to provide energy subsidies to bring in clean or alternative forms of energy. And honestly, if folks like Al Gore and other former and current public officials want to see clean energy take off and survive, then they need to find investors in the private market to come in, support those companies, and help them find an affordable alternative. Because right now, it's not an affordable option for the majority of the country. And right now, the best ways for us to provide energy to the majority of the country is gasoline and coal.
There's just no viable alternative right now.
No.
Wind turbines are a great idea. In
certain areas of the country, those are viable options. Wind turbines are.
Yeah, but for the vast majority, it's gasoline and coal. It comes down
Exactly.
to oil and coal. Comes down to fossil fuels. We have no real replacement that is affordable and the economy can support and will support the economy.
Exactly. There is no real alternative. Right now, we don't have a viable option to succeed gasoline. We just don't. And so at this point, the government should be looking more at what our resources are as far as coal and gasoline go, how we can make those more environmentally safe, how can we support companies in making those more environmentally safe, rather than fining companies because of pollution. Well, if you know that there's a pollution problem, then why don't you spend a tenth of the money that you're spending on enforcing these fines to find some solutions to how we can cost-effectively maintain the damage that's being caused. And I'm not someone who buys into global warming, but there is an element of pollution to our environment. I don't think it's causing the planet to unnaturally warm. I really believe that there's periods of warming and cooling, and it's cyclical, and it's happened over time. We had a period of warming early in the 20th century that was very similar to this. So I don't think that our carbon emission is causing the planet to unnaturally warm. But I do think that we are putting out chemicals into our environment, and those are things that we should study, but we should study those in the private market. We should study those in private companies that do testing on soil and testing on water to see what the effect of various different energy types is on the environment. But at the same time, the government doesn't need to step in and tell a business that it can't operate just because the government wants another business to succeed.
That's a well thought out opinion. That's it shows a lot of critical thinking, I think, and that's something else that we need. Let me ask you about what is going to be the hot button issue for next year, I believe, because they need further distractions from the healthcare debacle, and that would be our old friend, immigration reform. What are your thoughts on what you think they're going to do and what you think should be done?
Oh, I think they're going to kick the can further down the road. That's what they do best. I've gone back and forth on this issue, and I've actually had people who have otherwise agreed with every position I have who really get upset when it comes to immigration. But you know what it comes down to, and I don't know when your family came over to America, Bill, but the majority of my family came over in the mid to late 1800s. Several different ancestors of mine, my great-grandparents, came through Ellis Island. And actually, my great-grandfather didn't speak a word of English when he came here, came from Germany. And the second he got through, got processed and got through Ellis Island, he met a local American who actually robbed him blind of what little money he had left. But the thing is, my family was allowed to come here. My family was processed through the immigration system, and the reason that I've had the opportunities I've had, because my family came to America. My family was allowed to come to America. And the thing is, our immigration system is broken. The fact that it is so complicated to come into this country that people actually do risk their lives coming across our borders. We hear horror stories all the time about people who are murdered by the coyotes who they're paying to help them cross the border from Mexico to the United States. when we've got a situation where people are willing to risk their lives to get in this country because it's so difficult to get here legally, we know there's a problem. And this country has been so exceptional because of immigrants and because of the different ingenuity the immigrants from Europe and all over the country brought to America over the last 200 years, that we've got to find a way to solve this problem. And I think that way, and I know that every single person wants to call it amnesty. I don't think you call it amnesty. I think you say that, yes, people have broken our current immigration laws. And because of that, regardless of how long they've been here, they don't jump ahead of anyone who's already in line. They don't get an extra bump because they were sneaky enough to get across our borders or to remain here, and ICE never moved them out. Immigration and Customs Enforcement never moved them out. But we also don't have the financial ability to just remove people from our country. And the notion of building a border fence is simply comical. No matter how tall we build that fence, people are going to find a way to get over it. And we do not have the manpower to have someone standing in every square foot of distance along the U.S.-Mexico border. So when you get right into it, the only viable option is some sort of way to remain here legally. And because of that, if we give some sort of legal status to folks who have violated our laws and come here illegally, granted that they haven't committed any crimes while they've been here, obviously, that's a deal breaker. If we give them some sort of legal status, that enables them to pay taxes and to pay into the system that they are benefiting from, that their children are benefiting from, because people really typically get incensed about this issue and they don't focus in on all the different dynamics of the issue. There are children all across this country who are in our public school systems and who are benefiting from different public programs, whose families are here illegally and are not paying into the system. They're not paying taxes. So that's just further pressure on our public schools. It's costing us tons of money, and truthfully, the best option that we have is finding a way for folks to stay here legally, because these people obviously want to be here, obviously want to be Americans. For the most part, they're not here to do us any harm. They're not here to destroy our country.
Ladies and gentlemen, his name is Nick Zoller, and his website address is Zoller for Congress, Zoller for Congress.com. I strongly suggest that you check him out and check out his opinions. And judging by what we have heard from you during this interview, Nick, I am more hopeful than I was at 5 o'clock when you first called into the studio, because knowing that there's somebody like you that is out there running for Congress and is not shirking from what you perceive to be your duty, I give you the highest kudos that I possibly can.
I appreciate that, and thank you for having me today, and I appreciate anyone in your audience for taking the time to listen in and really, even if you don't agree with my issue positions all of the time, it's so important that you listen to the issues, you listen to what people who are running for office are saying, and if you have a problem with that, engage with the people who are running for office in your community. Engage with them and ask them the tough questions, because truthfully, every point of view in this country should matter again. No one should be the low man on the totem pole, and no one should feel like they don't have a say just because they don't have $5 million in the bank.
Exactly. Nick, I really appreciate you coming on the show, and this interview is going to be up on YouTube very shortly. I'm going to upload it as soon as the show is over. I don't usually do that, but I'm going to do it tonight. And I will make the MP3 of the interview available to you so that you can use it in your campaign or however you see fit. And I really appreciate you coming on the show and taking the time to talk to us tonight, Nick.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes, and good luck to you. Godspeed, sir, and go get them. That's all
Thanks.
I got to say. Go get them, and I will be watching you, and perhaps we'll speak again in the future.
Sounds good, Bill, and keep fighting the good fight on your end, too.
I am doing the best that I can with every ounce of energy that I have left.
Well, keep doing it. Keep
Okay.
doing everything you can.
Okay, thank you, sir, and have a good evening, and give your family my best.
You as well. Thank you.
Yep, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the candidate from the 13th District in Florida on the West Coast, on the Gulf Coast there. For those of you that are ditto heads, he's just a little ways north of where Rush Limbaugh is, and he sounds like a very, very conservative gentleman, which is something that we desperately need in Washington right now to take this train wreck and try to get it back on the tracks before it becomes a total wreck and ruins the entire country. And this is obviously only a 1-hour show because he was our only guest, and quite a good guest, I would say. And I appreciate you tuning in and listening to the show. If you've gotten this far in the archives or on the YouTube video, I certainly appreciate you taking the time to listen for the full hour. And his website again is zollerforcongress.com. ZOLLER for Congress.com. Go visit his site, engage with him, write him an email, and if you feel so, if you so desire, contribute a few dollars to his campaign, because I know he could sure use it, because the campaign machines are, I suspect, going to try to grind him up into hamburger and destroy him. And he sounds like he has the wherewithal to resist that as much as possible. So, my name is Bill Zam. This is Surrounded by Idiots on the Freedom Talk Radio Network and Celine Entertainment Television Group. And I thank you for listening. Have a good evening, and God bless all of you.